All right, all right. This is Real Estate Radio, and there's my buddy Jason Trotman. Hello, Jason.
Hey, how you
So
doing,
we've done
Joe?
this show. We've done our first Get to Know, and Coldplay comes to mind because, gosh darn it, it's all about music. At the end of the day, be happy,
Always.
people. Share the love. Dance madly. Dance like someone's watching when it comes to Chipman, not because it ain't pretty. But yeah,
Uh,
so let's talk about that real quick. So anything that's come up with whether it's kids listening to stuff, whether it's your wife, whatever it is there something new on Jason's playlist?
yeah, you know what? I've been learning to play the guitar over the past couple of years, and a song that I've been working on with my guitar teacher is actually two songs: "Blackbird" by the Beatles,
Oh yeah.
because it's a great finger picking song, and also now that the one I'm working on right now is "Sweet Creature" by Harry Styles, which has the same type of finger pattern as "Blackbird." So those two songs are on the top of my mind when it comes to the playlist. I'm
Well, so,
singing it, I'm practicing it so much now that my 3 year old was just singing it back to me. She goes, "Daddy, sweet creature." And I'm like, "What?"
no way.
Yeah, I'll send you a video of that. It's hilarious.
Yeah, so folks should know you have that beautiful little girl, and gosh, you don't do a lot of sharing of personal stuff, which I think
Yeah,
is commendable because
yeah,
the average mom or dad Facebook 17,000 pictures every single day. But you have your daughter, and now you've got some news to share.
yes, I'm expecting a son in November. So now both kids are going to be born in November. So it's going to be an expensive month in November for birthdays and Christmas right after that. So yeah, looking forward to it. Exciting.
A little boy comes in the world. That's actually so. My son Jordan, as you know, was born with some complications, heart disease and all, but he's a great little guy. But I remember when Maggie was born, he said, "We got a boy, we got a girl, we got a cat, we got a dog, we got a car, we got a truck, we got." Well, we don't have a picket white fence, but it's like that classic American scenario, and it really is a perfect time to switch uncomfortable gears. Um, because our topic today is racism uh, in real estate specifically a little bit, but just in general. Watching your posts on LinkedIn, um, Black Lives Matter, and my daughter coming into me saying about Black Lives Matter, she said all lives matter, and everyone's kind of focused on that. But what we just talked about, the ebb and flow of things, how you get top and you're all focused, and then the denouement, if you will, where you just stop focusing on it.
All
We need it
right.
to be a constant climax as far as I'm concerned. It has to be shaking the cans, rattling the barrels, and being a good person. Um, so, candidly, I was raised here in Newtown, Connecticut, a spoiled white kid. Um, and my first exposure to Black families or Black people in general at Worcester School in Danbury, Connecticut, being a private school, spoiled punk going off to a private school. The best thing about that school, in retrospect, was the diversity, was the fact that we had kids coming in from Kenya, kids coming in from Germany, all over the world.
Mm,
Um, but my first real good friend was a guy named Marcus Roundtree. And I've said this to you before, as a young man, not being around Black people, the first time I touched a Black person, I was like, that awkward kind of feeling. We're just going to keep it real here, Jason, because as that little kid, I was like, am I going to become Black?
yeah.
And it's such a place where these conversations, as you and I've talked about, they need to happen. There's plenty of wonderful people in this world, but there's also plenty of people that are just anxious and worried about this type of communication. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't do that. But just being saying that you're not a racist, I don't think is good enough anymore. You need to be active and to be anti-racist.
Absolutely. Be more proactive. No, I agree with you. I think in our society, our attention span keeps on shrinking and shrinking. And it's like you said, it's important that we constantly put focus on not just being not racist, but anti-racist, to be proactive in our messaging to let us know that and let everybody around us know that this is not acceptable behavior. And this is not how we want to raise our kids and the society that we want our grandkids to grow up in. Because I think the most important thing is by having these conversations, we're able to have these, you know, uh, to talk about stereotypes. We're able to get to what is a core problem behind, poverty, behind police brutality, behind hunger, behind all of these, issues that have been plaguing our society, since its inception. And it really just comes around acknowledging that white supremacy is what has been the cancer behind all of the racism, and especially the systemic racism that we have in our institutions. That where Black females are higher percentage of deaths in terms of pregnancy, where Black males are more likely to be incarcerated. And even to the point where I just read a article where they said 2/3 of people that are wrongfully convicted in the United States are Black. 2/3, which is mind-boggling when statistics show that Black people make up 13% of the U.S. population. That math just doesn't add up. It just screams that there's something wrong, and that we need to really be intentional about talking about it, but most importantly, finding solutions to make sure that it doesn't progress and move on to the next generation.
Yeah, those conversations to find those paths towards positivity and for being more human.
Right.
And you mentioned the stereotypes. So as I forgot to finish the thought of my daughter talking about Black Lives Matter, and she said to me, all lives matter. But it's not just a statement. She said, it's like, no, my life matters. Well, no, your house isn't on fire.
Right.
So your life doesn't matter at this moment. The person in that house is on fire. And so for the Black race to have the house on fire, everyone needs to pay attention. And it can't be an ebb and flow. It has to be. But kind of my thought is, maybe in just being positive, John, but my thought is, in general, we are still going up. We are still climbing a successful path. It may keep going down a little bit, but I think overall, since the 90s, early 90s, we started getting better at human relationships, because that's what they are. Right. And I met my father-in-law for the first time, God rest his soul, but he said to me, you know what, John, there's assholes in every race. Heck with the stereotypes. That being said, some of the stereotypes are wonderful, meaning I don't think there's any problem with some of them, meaning it's okay to have a stereotype that a white guy can't dance, or that a Black guy can dance. And it's funny, the Black guys that can't dance.
Can't dance, right, absolutely.
But those stereotypes, to me, they propel conversation. Absolutely. And for someone to say, hey, you're a white guy, you must, so I actually made a list of a few things with stereotypes. Can't dance is the first one, but the Eddie Murphy, the speak very distinctly. Like a nerd almost. I love that stereotype about the white guy. What's right. I'm not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe trick again, or something like that from Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop, right?
So the kind of making fun of the white guy, it's okay, But then, do we have to say make fun of the white guy or make fun of the Black guy? Just make fun of the guy.
Right.
But then we're not recognizing those stereotypes, which again aren't always a bad thing.
Right. I think it's important to acknowledge that, like you said, stereotypes, for the most part, aren't a bad thing, depending on what your intent is. If your intent is to have a conversation and to realize, and after you have the conversation, you realize that we have so much more in common than we have that's different. Just like you and I, we come from different parts of the country, different lifestyles, but what bounds us together is we want to have a safe neighborhood, good education for our kids, and a happy family, and opportunities to grow, just like anybody else, and be able to walk outside the door, go about your daily business, and not have to be worried about, interactions with police. As a Black person, I speak from, of course, my experience is that I try to limit my interactions with police. I have a lot of friends that are police officers. I respect the job. I know it's a hard job, because what people aren't talking about is, when do you call police? You only call police when something bad happens. You never call the police to say, hey, I just want to thank you for your service and what you do to make us, feel safe in community. So, just like we're human beings, they're human beings, and they're surrounded by so much negativity. Of course, it's going to impact their view of people and the view of the world. But in acknowledging that, you also have to put what's even more important is that treat everybody with humanely and with respect, no matter where they come from, no matter what you think they will do or will not do, based on the circumstance. And I think when we're talking about implicit bias, I like to think about it as giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Black people are less likely given the benefit of the doubt when something happens versus a white person in that same instance. It's normal to say, okay, if a black person gets shot by the police resisting arrest, well, there must be more to the story if it's a black person involved. If it's a white person, okay, it is what it is. So I think it's so important that we view it through a lens of giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, when it comes to issues like this, in instances like this, and, call a spade a spade. If it's wrong, it's wrong. But be honest with the fact that we want to make sure that everybody's treated equally and fairly. That's what the country is founded on. And those are the ideals that we espouse to the rest of the world. We need to start living up to it.
Yeah, and for the police folks, you're exactly right. And I think with COVID over the last year, more people are saying thank you and not just worrying about for an issue to happen before I actually communicate with a police officer. Just a thank you for what you do. Thank you for protecting us. And it goes kind of the comment about assholes in every race. There's assholes in every industry,
right?
As well,
Absolutely.
Right? And that's where, you watch these things on TV. It's so sensationalized, but it's so real. And to act like anyone hasn't had, not everyone has a situation in their life where they've run into some severe racism and didn't say something or say, hey, speak up, or hey, help that guy out. But I think almost everyone watching this probably has a moment, and regret's a strong word, but that's probably what it is, that I didn't say something.
Right.
And that's what it is for me. It is regret where I didn't say something, where I didn't push someone out of the way to support somebody. It can also it almost makes you want to cry because there's so many awesome friggin' people, but we let the sensational news drive that negativity sometimes. I just want to turn it off.
Yeah.
But then I don't want to be unavailable or not there to pray or to be supportive. And as we talked about before, well, on your LinkedIn, you do some of the LinkedIn posts, but a lot of stuff is done for you. And I see it almost every day, something about Black Lives Matter, and then a fun fact of the day. So you're doing a great balance of making sure, hey, we have to talk about this, but it's okay to also be okay with life, right? Because to get in the mire, get immersed in it and say every day, whoa, no, every day is, to me, it's a blessing to be able to get better.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to get better. Absolutely. You have to have that balance because otherwise life will just be draining. And before you turn around, you're gone, And so I think one of the way that I look at having the conversations and, making it sure that's top of mind in my social media is to, we talk about, Black Lives Matter. We talk about the issue of racism and equality, but also you have to laugh, without laughter, life is just not worth living, so you have to appreciate the small things in life, with our clients that are, annoying. And then we have our clients that are just absolutely amazing. You just appreciate being in that moment and being able to help other people and help yourself grow. Because again, this is about growth. And you said at the beginning, that we feel that we are constantly growing in the right trajectory. And I feel that same way too. I think the whole Black Lives Matter protest shows that everybody from all walks of life, it was all over the world, people were marching, just to say that this is wrong. This is not acceptable. And that gave me hope. So now that I'm having a Black son, even though I am worried as a Black father, of what his life will be, I am given hope and promise that there are going to be other people that are going to stand up for what's right, just like yourself and your family, that, people that aren't afraid to have those conversations.
I'd like you to tell the story of you as a kid talking about the ID card, because I'd like you to compare that to how you feel today about your son 5 years, 10 years from now, going out into the world, and what protection you're going to try to put around him, or more importantly, what do you think might be different today than it was in a long time ago when you were a kid?
Yeah, right. So you and I were having a conversation, and we're talking about how different ways we grew up. And one of the things that my dad would do is always tell me, "Hey, Jason, before you leave the house, always have your identification with you. Never leave your house without identification." And he would just drum it into me over and over again growing up. So, I would, once I left the house and I went to college and I'm around all these different people, I always made sure I had my ID. But then my white roommates wouldn't leave the house or leave the dormitory without any ID whatsoever. And I'm like, how could you leave your house without ID? He goes, what are you talking about? I just tell him who I am and where I live, and that's it. And I'm like, well, that's not the case with me, because I know that at any point in time, I can match a description of a specific subject from whatever crime. So I need to make sure it's incumbent upon me to make sure that I have my identification, so I can show who I am, where I live, and where I have been and where I have not been, so that I cannot be mistaken as as a suspect in any crime. And so that kind of difference in the way we've grown up sheds a light on the view of what America is through different people, different people's lenses. Like you said, media sensationalizes these narratives, of the constant police killings, and it has an impact. It has a huge impact, especially on the Black community, because imagine seeing somebody that looks like you constantly being killed by people that are supposed to protect you. On the side of the cars, it says to protect and serve, and yet they're so quick to shoot this person, and it just shows that there's a culture that devalues Black life, in the United States. And we need to do better and to kind of humanize, Black people, in the eyes of not just law enforcement, but also other aspects of our society. We're not just rappers and, sports stars and gangbangers and all of these, different narratives that are put out there. I think one of the things that I try to do more of, and I don't do it on LinkedIn because for me, LinkedIn is more kind of business, B2B, more than, person to person. So on my Facebook and my Instagram, that's where I use to put more of my personal life on there. And one of the things that I am conscious about is showing my day-to-day with my daughter, with my family, so that people can see that I'm just like you. And there is no such thing as the absentee Black father, and that's been a big narrative that's gone on for generations, that, the Black community is in disarray because there is a lack of Black fathers. And I make it, for me personally, I make it kind of my mantra to make sure that people know that is not the case. We love our kids and we will take care of our kids just like you do. We hope and we dream and we wish for all the best for them, just like you do.
I was going to just tag that with some of the greatest fathers I know are Black males. You know what I mean? And you can look at an athlete like a LeBron James. Now, there's no doubt how he cares about his family, and then me having, Michael Jordan, my guy, and then I follow and find out, he's not the greatest guy in the world. Or Dr. J back in the day. Yeah. I got to meet his wife, Turquoise, and Cheo, Jasmine, and Julius Jr. Oh, wow. Let me just share it real quick. So I went to his basketball camp, and I was a jerky kid, and I ended up dislocating my thumb. It was on a Sunday, and the infirmary at the camp was closed. So I had to go to the hospital. Dr. J's wife, Turquoise, drove me.
No way.
In the white station wagon, and they both had white cars. He had a white Corvette and she had a white station wagon, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, so I'm driving, I'm shaking. Two things. One, I realized how beautiful this woman is. I'm like, I had an instant crush on Turquoise. But then for the first time in my life, I was called a honky.
No way.
So I don't know which Cheo, Jasmine, or Julius Jr., which of the three said it, but Mama, where are we taking this honky?
Yeah, wow.
And I never heard that before. I had no idea what that was, but I had to go back and find out. But
Right.
we went to the infirmary. I got my thumb reset, get back. The showers had stopped. So Doc was teaching a clinic out at the basketball court. So I sat with the kids and turquoise on the side of the court. And my best friend, Anthony, who wanted me to go to the camp because he was a Doc fan. I was actually a Celtics fan. And so that was my entrance into loving Black athletes, because whether you want to throw the stereotype or not, let's face it, that jumping thing ain't happening for this guy specifically.
Right. Yeah.
But watching Doc fly up and take a dollar bill off the top of the backboard, I was like, holy cow. So
Wow.
three things happened. I had a crush on a Black woman. I was called a honky, and I was amazed by the athletic talent.
Talent. Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's so interesting, these stories, help us, humanize, because again, that's the key to all of this. It's to humanize people that don't look like you, that don't have the same experiences. And once we do that, as cliche as they say, love wins, love solves all things, it's a fact, we just need to love each other, and that will solve a majority of the problems that we're dealing with right now. It's always been the problem in the human race, is the lack of love.
Well, and how easy it is to hate.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's part of this for me, is that I was a lover, not a fighter. That's just my way I was brought up. I was a mama's boy, and we both found out both our moms were,
Microbiologists, right?
Microbiology in general is just a very specific science in a way, right?
Exactly.
So I talked about, I was always washing our hands. So we had that from our child. We were both washing our hands like madmen. But when you start having conversations, you're going to find out the rich things, the little things that turn into beautiful things. I watched your work ethic. I watched how you wanted to help the other agents. I knew how focused you were on making the whole office come together and collaborate and share. And I fell in love with you, man. I knew this was a brother I could trust, I could relate to. And just over the last 20 years, well, 15 years, whatever it's been, you prove it. I know that I found a really good person, the positive impact, my little pip thing. But to me, there was absolutely no doubt. So you're 100% right. I think the problem is it's easy to hate. It's hard to love.
Yes.
To love, maybe appropriately is the right way to put it, but just to really have that human kindness, that love happens naturally once you really have that true care and true kindness in your heart.
I think you have to, and I think for you and I, we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations and surrounded ourselves with people that didn't look like us. So it's a little bit easier for us to have these conversations versus people that have never seen a Black person, or they don't have a Black friend other than a coworker that they happened to see before COVID in the office. Now it's just via Zoom. It's surprising how a lot of older adults don't have Black friends. And I tell my wife this often. I've been, it doesn't matter if it's liberal or conservative, I've been to a lot here in DC, a lot of liberal events, social events. And, they're talking about, the criminality, the systemic racism in the criminal justice system, and all of the things that socially progressive, social justice topics. And yet I'll be the only Black person in the room, And so that to me is telling, you understand, the plight of what's going on right now, but you yourself aren't doing enough to look around and say, okay, who's not here in this room with me, to give me a different perspective, and I think, with the Black Lives Matter movement and what's going on, the woke culture that some people will say, or the cancel culture, it's making it easier for people to diversify where they are. It's, whether it be the Oscars or, the Grammys, whatever we're seeing, there is a push through society to make every aspect of society more diverse. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing for us to bridge these gaps of misunderstanding and to have these conversations so that, it makes it easier to say, hey, That's my friend John. Oh, you mean that black guy? No, that guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So our kind of perspective shifts, and you see that person as a human being and not the color of sin and the skin. Quick story. I have a good friend of mine. He's one of my groomsmen. We've known each other for 20 years from college. We have never talked. He's white from South Georgia. We've never talked about race ever, until
For any
Black Lives
particular
Matter.
reason? For any particular reason, or it just didn't happen?
It didn't happen. It didn't
No, you
happen.
don't
It
think it was
wasn't
like
one of,
active avoidance or?
probably subconsciously, it was probably avoidance, but there was nothing that in our interaction that came up that would kind of spark that
Right,
conversation,
right, yeah.
And of course, this was like way before George Floyd and everything that's happened. So now that George Floyd has happened and the protest, our first conversation with each other about race was, hey, I want to make sure, because he saw me posting things. He goes, hey, I want to make sure that you're not turning into a liberal activist, and that, racism isn't that big of a deal. It's not as bad now as it was, back in the 60s. Don't get caught up in the narrative by the media. And that's the first conversation, the first statement we've ever had about race was that right there. And it took me a minute to digest what he said to me. And I still struggle with it today, because this is one of the closest friends I have, and we still haven't had a coming to Jesus moment about race, because to me, he just looks at me as Jason. This is my friend Jason. I'm not a black guy, and I'm telling him, hey, as a black guy named Jason, this is what happens. I've experienced it. People that I know have experienced this. And I'm telling you, as somebody who you love and you care about, that this happens, and he listens, and then he'll say the things that we now kind of, the objections. Well, what about black and black crime? What about, he uses the different stereotypes to kind of, justify him not acknowledging that racism is a problem. And he's like, Jason, we've been friends forever. There's not a racist bone in my body, but I always think that there's more to the situation, and I'm like, how can there be more to racism? It's just either right or it's wrong. What side of history do you want to be on? Then it makes me question, how are you treating or teaching your kids to deal with race? How comfortable am I going to be bringing my kids, to come play with your kids? And, we have that conversation about race. So again, these, I'm sure, are conversations that a lot of people are having, but we need to have more of these.
It's just a great example of it where if it's not discussed, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And for you guys, just had a great friendship, great relationship. And I'm sure it put a little ruffle in it to have that comment made by your friend, but maybe that was the beginning of his evolution to change and get better. Because it hit me a couple of times about being more active and anti-racist than just saying I'm not a racist. I still don't feel I do enough, even though I'm supporting things and I add on to petitions but I pull back only a little bit when it comes to law enforcement, because what we just talked about, because we know that I think there's three things maybe happening. One is that just a racist, and we can nail that down.
Right.
Two, not trained properly.
Right.
Three, scared.
Yes.
I can't imagine being a police officer. There's not a chance. I was worried about the draft in the 70s. Thank God that ended. Oh my God, I'm not going to war. Because I love to protect my country. I love my country, but I'm kind of a wimp.
Yeah, same here.
But I respect it. I appreciate it. But it goes to that comment that there's jerks in every industry. There's jerks in every race. And so you have a jerk in that race. That white guy's a jerk to begin with. Then he's a jerk as a cop. That's a dangerous combination.
Yeah.
I think that might be what's happening. And then you see the woman. It's like, well, I think that's just fear. I think it's poor training. Maybe it's having that taser option before you. And the fact that it thought it was a taser and not a gun, all this stuff makes me go to training, poor training, But to me, it's like, you don't pay these guys enough. But I mean, that's part of the problem too. You have to be elitely trained, then you'll get better pay. Maybe that, I have no idea. I'm really thinking out loud as we have this discussion, but it troubles the heck out of me. And then think about the families. If this hurts me or hurts you, think about that tight sphere around that person, around George, whatever person you want to point out in these horrific situations, because they make my stomach turn. And to think that I just pictured the whole George Floyd thing. It still blows my mind that there even had to be a discussion about right or wrong on this. To me, unless it goes to a training issue, like I guess we could talk about, but to me, that's just a bad human issue. But he was terrified. He was scared. No, I don't think so. There's a big black and white to that. I'm not talking race. I'm talking about clear decision, clear path, black and white. And to me, that was horrific.
Yeah, so, I agree. And I think to your point where you're talking about training, I think training is a component of it. I think you also there needs to be more oversight from the community that the police departments serve. Because before police unions and politicians have been against community advisory boards. And I think if you don't have the input of the community that the police department serves, then these things are going to constantly happen. And you have a cycle of trauma that's happening within that community. That you have, George, just in Minneapolis alone, you've had so many police-related killings. So the impact that has on that community that no longer trusts the police department, in case they need help, and so now you have this mistrust that keeps on growing and growing to these incidents you have now. But then you see in New Jersey, there are a couple articles that have come out where they have not, the police department in New Jersey has not fired not one shot in 2020, and crime has gone down already, so it's different ways that the community is involved in policing that I think makes a big difference. And then accountability is huge. It's huge.
That's like the compound effect of it, though. Like in Minneapolis, like you talked about, eventually community is not going to care.
Yeah.
And that would be the worst place ever to get to.
Exactly.
And so your friend talking about, we're not like the 60s or the 70s. It goes back to always trying to find silver lining, trying to be positive. That impact for me, the positive impact would be to say this: it ain't the 60s, it ain't the 70s, it ain't the 80s, even it ain't in the 90s. We're much better today than we were, but the anger and angst, if you will, around these discussions, that's where I struggle, because I feel like that's the underlying issue, is that person is just not a good person. And that's why that conversation is not going to go anywhere and not going to be leading towards some successful resolution. It's not going to be an overnight resolution.
Right.
I think, again, knowing that we're just getting better every day, and folks like us want to have these conversations to hopefully make someone think twice before being a jerk or saying the wrong thing or not standing up for somebody, then I'll sign up for that yesterday.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you said it best. Every day we're getting better. We're going in the right direction. That's the most important thing, that we're getting to a point where we are truly equal, and everybody's treated with humane respect for each other.
And hugs and love and kindness. And it's not a kumbaya kind of thing that I'm trying to do here, but I think if you can find a way every day, when that moment where you're going to be angry, to step back and say, why am I being angry? Do I need to be angry? Do I need to show that anger? Or can I don't want to internalize it and blow myself up, but those are little things that you can push aside. There's plenty of those things that I'm working on for myself that I know I don't need to get upset about that.
Right.
My kind of MO is it'll all work out. You can say it like it'll all work out. And some days you'll say it'll all work out. As long as you have that positive idea that it will all work out. Yeah. But this isn't going to work out without human kindness, human effort, rolling up the sleeves, as they say, and getting involved.
Yeah.
So if this is my one little piece to propel some of those conversations, or to, have someone say, yeah, I don't need to fill that stereotype. I'm not that, so I'm going to be different. But one of the stereotypes that I've always been kind of I wrote down, I'm making fun of myself, please note, God didn't give me an upper lip. So the black people at the upper lips thing, you know what? I've always been very jealous.
I've never even thought about that. You know,
I was like,
I
no,
love
nothing.
it.
I
Love it.
mean, so again, stereotypes we should be able to giggle at
Right.
and embrace and admire.
Right.
It's like, um,
Just like watermelon and fried chicken. And, everybody loves watermelon fried chicken. If you don't
who
like that,
doesn't?
something's wrong with you if you don't like that.
And rap music, of course, is stereotype, like you mentioned. Again, I wrote down that every good man on this planet can be my friend.
Right.
And I feel strongly about that. You're a good person. You take care of your kids. You take care of your significant other. You're already 90% ready to be my friend. Not that they want to be, I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
Be a good person. Have a positive impact. Everyone has their bad days. Life is crazy right now. COVID has thrown us into a spin, but I think when we look back on this pandemic era, I hope we find people that did things like you, spent more time learning guitar and tried to figure it out. We've had that time.
Yeah.
I've done videos. I've found out how to shut up more.
You're doing a great job. Yeah.
Well, again, my little piece to LinkedIn's cold world. But you're right. It's supposed to be more business to business, more. But I think LinkedIn needs a more levity, and so I'm trying to provide that here and there. But also, I'm going to be doing more of these conversations. That iBuyer conversation that I had with my buddy Ohan that just got released, I think that was a great episode. It was very awkward to think about your position right now as an agent. We should come back and talk about the iBuyer because I think the perception is very similar. What we talked about with Ohan, I was talking about the late 90s, early 2000s when the realtor.com and the internet basically came into real estate. Everyone was like either, oh, I'm just terrified. What's going to happen? I'm like, oh, it's not going to be that big. Don't worry about it. And that's kind of where we are right now with the iBuyer companies. Oh, I still got my business. I'm not worried about it. So if you're the next 10 years, probably not going to have a huge impact.
Right.
But 15, 20, 25 years, those iBuyer companies, the list is like freaking forever. I thought there was like 5, 6, there's like 25, 30 companies that are iBuyer companies.
Really? Wow.
So for what you do as a career, for what you do to help your family, I'm worried, big picture moving forward. But so again, have those conversations, make people think. I don't want people to panic. I'm out of real estate. I got to find another job. But you should think about what they're doing, how perhaps you can be a part of it, and then make sure you're aware of what the next 20 years might look like, or at least try to understand it.
Understand it. I think that's the most important thing for me, because I'm not very versed in iBuyers, is really understand the concept behind it. To go back to your point where internet, came into real estate and people started panicking, and the Zillows and Redfin, people were just like, oh my goodness, now the buyer no longer needs a real estate agent to look at the pictures and send them the information. They could get it all on their own. I think no matter how good technology gets, there is still and as a realtor from this perspective, the importance of having somebody that can help you navigate people, because this is still a people business. And it doesn't matter how good technology is, you're still dealing with people. And when people are talking directly to each other, nothing good comes out of it without an intermediary to help them focus on what's the most important thing, which everybody's trying to get to, which is to the closing table and get the transaction closed. So
that's trust.
That's trust. You'll not get that on an AI, on any type of program. Right. People need to see people and have these one-on-one conversations, eye to eye, to understand that this person is working for my best interests. And I've had more kind of issues with transactions where it's not straightforward. Something happens that throws everything out of whack, and you constantly are thinking outside the box to how can I solve this problem to, keep the deal going, and that's something that only experience can afford you.
Yeah, well, that's the AI world. It's big and everyone's paying attention to it, but human interaction, like you just mentioned, the hand-holding of the consumer going through the process, maybe because I'm getting old, I just feel really strongly about that. I've always, as you know, but my job was to protect the realtor and help you guys stay in touch. Don't be forgotten. That's been my goal from day one. And then, of course, helping agents understand the technology, which is always going to be a mission. I don't think that's ever going to go away. But that's something we can get back and chat about, because I certainly enjoy chatting with you. I'm glad we've had this conversation. Just the beginning.
Yeah, beginning of many more conversations. Because I think, like I said, we have to have these conversations in order to move forward, to bridge that gap.
No, you're a good man. I can't believe you're having a little boy. That's awesome.
I know. Super excited. Super excited.
Yeah, and you'll then have to. Well, then it comes down to, I guess, playing a song at his first birthday.
Yeah.
You have enough time to do it.
I have enough time to learn it, exactly. And maybe he'll be singing "Sweet Creature" or "Blackbird," just like my 3-year-old downstairs.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I'll send you a video. It's super cool.
So, Jason, this is it's a pleasure. I appreciate you jumping on and chatting about this. I think it's something, like I said, and you just agreed, we should continue this. Maybe it's not a weekly deal, but once a month, just to see if we both feel like we're going in the right direction. Human beings,
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sean, for doing this.
Love to your family. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye. Good day.